Welcome to the Qualys, a subscriber-exclusive podcast. Qualys is just a shorthand slang for a qualification round, which is something you do prior to the race, just a little bit quicker. The Qualys podcast features episodes that are short, we're hoping for less than 10 minutes each, which highlight the best questions, topics, tactics, etc. discussed on previous episodes of The Drive. We recognize many of you, as new listeners to the podcast, may not have the time to go back and listen to every episode, and those of you who have already listened may have forgotten. So the new episodes of the Qualys are going to be released Tuesday through Friday, and they're going to be published exclusively on our private subscriber-only podcast feed. Now, occasionally, we're going to release Qualy episodes in the main feed, which is what you're about to hear now. If you enjoy these episodes, and if you're interested in hearing more, as well as receiving all of the other subscriber-exclusive content, which is growing by the month, you can visit us at peterattiamd.com/subscribe. So without further delay, I hope you enjoy today's Qualy.
Insights about berberine.
So berberine is a plant-derived extract that has two properties, one of which it gets a lot of attention for, one of which it might not be as well known. The first is that it is a weak AMP kinase activator. And for those of you that have shown an interest in what metformin does, that's sort of that's probably the secret sauce of metformin, is its AMPK activation. So berberine, when taken at sort of recommended OTC doses, which I don't remember the doses anymore. I think it's like it might be actually a comparable dose to metformin. It might be like either 500 twice a day or 1,000 twice a day. Does have some of that weak AMPK activation. And the net effect of that is it decreases hepatic glucose output. So it's upregulating AMPK is telling the liver, hey, you can make less glucose. So send less glucose out of the body. And so in that sense, it's a poor man's version of metformin. I don't find that interesting. I prefer to just use metformin. If we're going to go down that path, let's do it pharmacologically with potent drugs that we understand, that are consistent from batch to batch, that have a much higher sort of oversight of regulation and that kind of stuff. The other thing about berberine, and this is when I still do use it in clinical practice, is it is also a weak inhibitor of the enzyme PCSK9, which any listener of this podcast is going to be very well up to speed on what PCSK9 is. The word on the street is it probably only works in a subset of people who overexpress PCSK9. So PCSK9 is a protein that degrades LDL receptors. So if you overexpress this enzyme, you're going to really degrade LDL receptors. You're going to have a higher LDL particle number and probably a higher LDL cholesterol. If you take that subset of patients, they seem to respond quite nicely to berberine. Now, the question is, how do you know that? I don't think there's a test anymore to measure that. Atria, which I think might have got absorbed into VAP or something like that, I think used to have a test. But in the end, I was like, why am I going to do some test on somebody to see if they overexpress PCSK9 before I give them berberine? I'll just give them berberine, make no other change, and see. If there's not a significant enough difference in their LDL, I don't care. And every once in a while, you look like a rock star. You get this patient whose LDL is really high, and you check your boxes, like they don't have, their triglycerides aren't that high, their phytosterols are not that high, their stanols are not that high, their desmosterol's not that high. Hey, they clearly have defective LDL clearance. Maybe they overexpress PCSK9, which would be one of 1,000 reasons you could have high. Literally, there are 2,000 genetic mutations that can lead to an inability to clear LDL receptacles. This is one of them, but this one amounts to about 5% of them. And so in that patient, you hit them with berberine and all of a sudden, everything's fixed.
Do you see that with metformin at all?
No, I don't think metformin possesses that piece of what berberine has. I hope you enjoyed today's Qualy. Now sit tight for that legal disclaimer. This podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. And note, no doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to the podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnoses, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, I take conflicts of interest very seriously. For all of my disclosures, the companies I invest in and/or advise, please visit peterattiamd.com/about.